Modern economies are becoming less dependent on climatic conditions to further progress their key sectors. Now, in Rwanda, one of this is the agriculture sector that maintains the biggest contribution to the GDP. In today's episode, we speak to investor philanthropist Howard G. Buffett to guide us on replicable farming methods that will see Rwanda march up to global productivity standards. My name is George Ndirangu. Welcome to Doing Business in Rwanda.
American philanthropist Howard Buffett, through his Howard G. Buffett Foundation, plans to put down up to $500 million in support of agricultural development in the country. According to Howard, however, although this will improve agricultural productivity and enhance research, the question still remains: how scalable is this intended effort?
That we're taking this 1,200 plus hectares with 63 pivots, and we're going to run it all on solar energy. That's never been done before, but I have total confidence that the actual operational part of it will work. The challenging part is going to be keeping the 2,000 smallholder farmers in place and figuring out how to deal with the crops and the maintenance and the irrigation schedules and all the things that are kind of the nuts and bolts of making it work. It's going to be a big challenge. I mean, it's not going to be easy to do. We did the impact studies. The impact, the lake is huge. It will have absolutely probably between almost minimal to zero impact on the lake because the lake recharges every year. You won't be, it will not be noticeable, the water we take out of the lake. So I'm comfortable with that. That was one of the big concerns I had, is how would we impact the water system, and it's almost zero impact. The challenge is going to be going forward on making sure that farmers can get what they need out of it, and that's going to take a certain amount of cooperation. It's a challenge with human nature. It's a challenge with mindset. It's a challenge with getting people to cooperate and do things differently. So that's very different than over here, where this is just simply, I think, really just high risk.
And of course, the reaction is not rigid. It could change according to the outcome, of course.
It can change, absolutely. I mean, I could not tell you today what that project will look like in 1 year. I couldn't. It's impossible because too many things will change. I can tell you, we'll get the pump station built, we'll get the solar panels up, we'll get the irrigation systems up, but I can't tell you what everything looks like on the ground and exactly what the problems are going to be or how we're going to solve them. We've watched all these studies over the years of how much farm ground does Africa have, how much can they produce, and I've just never really believed them because I've spent a lot of time in Africa for 30 years, and I just see too many things that don't line up with how people want to talk about them. And I think a lot of times people want to be overly positive, and I just can't bring myself to look at it that way. So we did a study that took us about 1.5 years, which we're going to release at the World Food Prize here in October, that looks just at what you're talking about. What are the political barriers? What are the physical barriers for Africa to feed itself? I mean, people want to talk about Africa's going to feed the world. They're not going to feed the world before they feed themselves. And they got a long ways to go before they feed themselves. I mean, Africa as a continent is really the only place in the world where in the last decade, on a per capita basis, people have gotten hungrier. Okay, so we're not going the right direction. And so that means you've got to swing it around, and it's a big change that's going to have to take place. So, there's a couple of basic things. I mean, one is you have to have the infrastructure to be able to produce and move and sell and create markets. The more corrupt a country is, the more challenging it is and the more difficult it is to get investment, which means you're not going to get those things. So the bottom line is, the government is the biggest factor. There's no way you can have success in any country at all without the government doing what you need them to do. And the very bottom starting point is rule of law.
Now, you've talked about the rule of law, but there's also another issue, which is the value chain, where we've talked about this even in the morning when we were catching up, and we said There is either the middleman who wants to get all the money that the farmer should get, or the amount that is floated to the buyer doesn't necessarily trickle down to the farmer who's done most of the work. So the farmer ends up losing most of the money. So how do we regulate this now to ensure that the farmer is the biggest beneficiary of his products?
I don't think you can regulate it, and I don't think you can actually just go out and say we're going to make it happen. I mean, I will tell you, most farmers in the United States this year are going to probably lose some money, at least in the Midwest where I farm, because the commodity prices are depressed so much. So when I think about that, and I have thought about it a lot, there's no easy solution to it. But I believe that as you create more value and more opportunity in any one location, it does raise the standard of living up. It creates an environment where people can spend more money, where their wages can increase, and so hopefully through that process, what you get is a little more competition. People are all romantic about poverty, and the truth is, it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. You know, if somebody earns enough money, they beat the tag. It's not $1.25 a day. It's not $2.50 a day. They get to, you know, $10 a day. Maybe in the country they're in, they're out of poverty. I had a great meeting up in close to Benny about 4 years ago with a farmer who's a cacao farmer, and I was there with the guy from the U.S. who was buying cocoa, or he made cocoa, so he was buying cacao, and I sat down with this guy with an interpreter, and nobody was around, and I just started asking him. I said, "Well, how is this going for you?" And it was really interesting, his answer. He says, "Well, people tell me I used to live on $1 a day." He said, "I don't know if I lived on $1 a day." He says, "I don't know what I lived on, but I couldn't feed my kids every day. They couldn't go to school. I could never buy my wife a dress." He says, "Now they tell me I live on $9 a day." He says, or $10 a day, whatever he told me. And he got all excited. He says, "I don't know if I'm living on $10 a day." He says, "But I can buy my wife a dress and my kids are going to school." So we have this, in the Western world, we have this way of framing things. You know, if they're earning $1.25, they're in extreme poverty. If they're earning $2, they're in poverty. If they're like, you know, people don't think that way. They're not living that way. They are, all they know is if they can provide for their family. All they know is, can they take the next step? And you can't do that unless you provide them a way to earn money.
All right, now you're talking about, that's all about sustainable solutions. Now, we have this approach that you're giving towards agriculture, which is the no-till farming, that is aimed to upscale at least the level of productivity in the markets. But there's been a lack of technical know-how in the agriculture sector in Africa, in DRC, as is in the region. So how exactly should we expect to uptake no-till farming, a new way to farm and a new way to put in our crops, to ensure that we want the productivity that we want? How is this being received here?
Well, so when we looked at that, we thought the United States is very successful in this, and they started 150 years ago, and they had a very deliberate plan on what they were going to do, and they invested heavily in what we call land-grant universities, because they knew that you had to have the research, and the key part of it is the extension. I mean, how are you going to get what you learn out to the farmer, and how are they going to apply it in the field? So, you know, we looked around at Africa and we thought, where could we try to do something a little bit different at scale? And we felt comfortable trying this in Rwanda. So, what we're starting this year, and we really, I can't map it out for you. I can't tell you this is exactly how it's going to work or how we're going to do it and how, you know, I mean, it's something new to us, and it's something bigger than what we, you know, usually would go do. So we're going to try to create an institution with a lot of Rwandan students in the United States and in Costa Rica at 2 different institutions that we think will prepare them well, and begin getting them educated, bring them back so that when this institution is up and running, then it can be Rwandans that operate it, they run it, they teach it, they're going to have the skills to do this. And we want to do it at a scale where people can actually see it change. And you know, I don't know how long I'll live. I may not be around to see it all, but you know, we want to overcome this idea that you go in and do these small projects and help little groups of people at a time. We want the Rwandan government or the Congolese government, we want them to invest in the things that will change the future, that will give people the opportunity to be successful in the future. That isn't a project here, a project there, a project here. That is the investment in people and training and extension and universities. I'm the worst guy to say this because I'm not a big academic guy, but you've got to have academics and universities. You've got to have trained people that can help train other people. And so our effort that we're trying to start in Rwanda is something we've never tried before, but we're confident we've been given the support. We're confident we'll have the support to continue to try to accomplish it.
When there was the trade facilitation and people wanted non-tariff barriers removed all the way from the ports to the inland countries such as Rwanda, for example, there was the issue of non-tariff barriers, and people campaigned for it over 1 year, saying this is the reason why trade is not going as smoothly. So that was removed, and after that another barrier came up, another barrier came up, another barrier. So it's layer on layer to some of these short changes. So tell us how this is being mitigated on your end.
Most of these processes or situations have existed for many years. When I look at Africa in that relationship, I mean, I immediately think about how important regional integration is in regional trade. And if you took a section of Africa, and this won't make everybody happy when I say this, but you know, look at South Africa and look at the incredibly negative impact Zimbabwe's had on South Africa. So now you've got, you know, Zimbabwe affected by it, maybe a little bit, Angola and Namibia not so much. So one big disruption like that in that region can have a huge impact on all the other countries. Come up into the Great Lakes region. Look at what's going on in South Sudan. Look at what's going on in Burundi, or what could happen in Burundi now. Look at, you know, it's more peaceful and stable here today, but what was it 2 years ago? So you take those kind of situations, and it's very hard, you know, to try something long enough and to bring it in slow enough that you adjust to it. And so when you just come in and go, bam, we're going to change the tariffs, or we're going to change the way we do this, you know, it's overnight, and those things don't work very well, and people don't adjust them very well, and you don't really know, it's very hard to know what the true consequences are. And so when you have enough negative consequences, then a lot of times you overreact.
Interesting conversation with Howard Buffett of the Howard Buffett Foundation, giving us tentative alternatives that the agriculture industry in Rwanda could employ. Now that's all we have time for. To give us feedback or insight, email us at dbir@abn360.com or tweet us at @dbirwanda, or my personal handle at Ndirangu. On behalf of the entire Doing Business in Rwanda team that made this possible, thank you for watching. Keep it CNBC Africa, first in business worldwide.